Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Fall 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Adam Lowensteiner, Vice President of Lytham Partners. During this fireside chat and presentation, we welcome Reliq Health Technologies, ticker symbol of RHT, that is Robert Harry Thomas on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and RQHTF, that is Robert Quebec Harry Thomas Frank in the US, and its CEO, Dr. Lisa Crossley. Before we begin, for those not familiar, Lytham Partners is one of the country's leading investor relations firms with more than 2 decades of corporate access experience. We have built one of the industry's most diverse and effective platforms for connecting small cap companies with high quality and focused institutional investors while creating a framework of best practices in all aspects of investor relations. Today's discussion is hopefully yet another example where we could bring value to multiple constituents. We will dive into the discussion in a moment, but one final item, I want to remind everyone that Reliq Health Technologies is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, please send me an email at lowensteiner@lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meeting request button. With that said, let's begin. Lisa, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you for having us. So as Adam mentioned, my name is Lisa Crossley and I'm the CEO of Reliq Health Technologies. I'll be going through a brief investor slide deck, which will be fairly familiar to current investors, but will certainly hopefully contain useful information for new investors. And then Adam, I think you and I will have an informal chat where we can go through some of the common questions that you've been getting from investors. Forward-looking statement, just the standard disclaimer here that anyone can review at their leisure. So who are we? Reliq Health is a profitable, rapidly growing global telemedicine company, and we specialize in the virtual care market. We're a software as a service company, and our platform is specifically designed to help chronic disease patients manage their complex conditions in the home in such a way that they're able to avoid preventable complications that lead to costly interventions like ER visits and hospitalizations. Our platform benefits everyone in the healthcare system, from the payers to the clinicians to the patients. We provide comprehensive turnkey solutions to clinicians so that it's really very quick and easy to deploy our platform in their practices and to start to generate new revenues. We generate our recurring revenues from subscription, and we grow organically based on trends in the industry and a lot of really favorable tailwinds for us right now. We have very strong margins by the end of this calendar year, 2022. We expect to have our gross margins at 75% and our EBITDA margins at 45%. And we are planning to uplist to the NASDAQ given the recent relatively soft market conditions. We're looking at early 2023 instead of late 2022, but still imminent. And most importantly, it is a rapidly growing business. We expect to have over 100,000 patients onboarded onto our platform by the end of this calendar year, so by December 31st, 2022, and to have over 200,000 onboarded by the middle of 2023, so end of June-ish, 2023. And those are some very significant numbers. Recent milestones for us in this calendar year. We signed a contract with Cognizant. Cognizant is a multi-billion-dollar global multinational. They're a Fortune 500 firm, and they have provided us with the ability to scale, particularly on the care management side, to really any scale of client. So whether they have hundreds of patients or millions of patients, we're now able to cover that full spectrum of client size through our standard software platform, which is inherently scalable, but by leveraging Cognizant's care management services, which are more HR related, so more dependent on personnel. In addition, that partnership with Cognizant has really given us kind of the good housekeeping seal of approval from a major player in the healthcare IT space. And that's been really critical for us in terms of landing some of the other large contracts that we've gotten this year, one of which is a contract with Datasoft Logic. They're a US nationwide home healthcare software provider, and their clients have been asking them for a virtual care solution that they could provide to clinicians. And with that Datasoft Logic partnership beginning in 2023, we'll be adding roughly 50,000 patients per year, or 36 million in annual revenue, to our platform and to the company. We also have some, great tailwinds that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. But, recently, one of the milestones that, where we've capitalized on Medicare and Medicaid changes is this year they introduced 5 new billing codes for remote therapeutic monitoring, which is around respiratory conditions as well as musculoskeletal conditions. So that increased the size of our potential patient base by over 20 million patients. So we have roughly a $60 million total 60 million patient total eligible population, which is obviously an enormous market for us. And most recently, we signed a contract with the Physician Network in Florida that's also going to onboard 50,000 patients to our platform. They'll have those 50,000 onboarded by the end of 2023. And again, that will account for roughly 36 million in annual recurring revenue at full deployment. I won't dwell on this slide, but it'll be available to anyone who wants it. I think, the one thing that I really do want to kind of point out on this slide is that we're currently trading at a revenue multiple that's less than 2.5 what we're projecting for calendar year 2022. Typical multiples in this space are 5 to 30 times forecasted revenues, but they tend to be much higher for companies that are going through a period of rapid growth and companies that are profitable, both of which certainly describe Reliq. So I think the company's very undervalued at the moment, and we look forward over the next several quarters to publishing our results and really giving the market confidence so that we can achieve the valuation that we know the company deserves. The leadership team, I'll just very briefly say that we're all very experienced healthcare and IT leaders who have a lot of experience, decades of experience in not just launching new products, but in building and leading new companies. And so the fundamental reason for being for Reliq is this problem, that chronic disease accounts for over 80% of all healthcare spending. So patients with chronic diseases like asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, congestive heart failure, diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, these are what we call the super users of the healthcare system. So they account in the US in particular for trillions of dollars of spending every year. And the primary reason that these patients are so expensive is because on a day-to-day basis, these elderly patients typically are responsible for managing multiple complex chronic conditions in the home on their own. And that's very difficult for them. We know that less than 50% of them remember to take their medications as prescribed, and that alone accounts for a significant percentage of hospitalizations. So little interventions in the home that can help these patients engage more in their own care, but also provide a safety net where if a patient is starting to destabilize, a clinician can intervene early. And that's really the only way to kind of address those preventable complications, reduce hospitalizations and ER visits, and reduce healthcare costs. And we've been the beneficiary of Medicare and Medicaid's very progressive, proactive approach, where they've moved away from fee-for-service payments to value-based care. So basically, clinicians are now heavily incented to provide more preventative, proactive care, which is exactly what we enable with our platform. So our modular platform, we can provide a range of services for essentially all of the, I believe we're up to 23, and there'll be 28 in 2023 billing codes that cover quite a broad range of different virtual care modalities, from behavioral health integration, which is more around mental health or addiction management, to the typical remote patient monitoring for patients with chronic diseases who are using devices in the home to monitor their care, to transitional care management for post-discharge from skilled nursing or long-term care facilities. There's really a very, very broad range of virtual care services covered by Medicare and Medicaid. And our platform is so flexible that it's able to easily address all of those through these different modules. So a typical use case for us, you're dealing with patients who have these very complex clinical conditions that can have really significant complications that can even lead to death. And so for a typical patient with congestive heart failure who's at home, they're asked by their doctor to weigh themselves every day, to record their weight, and to note if there's a sudden increase of 2 to 5 pounds in 24 hours, which indicates that they're going into heart failure and they've got an increasing fluid load. But patients will forget to take their weight, or they'll forget to write it down, or they'll forget what's the threshold at which they're supposed to call their doctor. And so what happens is these patients don't realize that they're having a congestive heart failure flare up until they start to notice chest pain and maybe a sense of pressure, difficulty breathing. And at that point, the patient's fluid load is such that it's putting tremendous pressure on the heart and the lungs and the kidneys. And so the patient goes into the emergency room with this chest pain or pressure or difficulty breathing, and they're admitted to the intensive care unit because they are a complex patient and they've let this get to the point where there's been some damage done. And at that point, you're looking at a multi-week stay, most likely, and the cost of the healthcare system is going to be into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And more importantly, for the patient, from a quality of life perspective, when they're discharged because of that damage to various organs caused by allowing that congestive heart failure episode to progress, they're going to have long-term health consequences and a reduced quality of life. If that patient is using IUGO care in the home, they'll be given a cellular or Wi-Fi enabled scale, and they'll be reminded every day by the platform to step onto the scale and collect their weight. The patient themselves, they don't need to actually know what their weight is. They certainly don't need to record it. It's automatically transmitted from the scale directly to our platform, the IUGO care platform. And then the clinician is alerted. You have a patient whose fluid load is increasing, they've had this sudden weight gain, the clinician can call in a new diuretic prescription for that patient, and that can stop the flare, can reduce the fluid load, prevent the organ damage, and keep that patient healthy and at home. So these little interventions in the home have a dramatic impact on patients' long-term health, on their quality of life, and also significantly on healthcare spending. So the benefits of our platform: for patients, we improve health outcomes. That improves quality of life. We're reducing ER visits. We're significantly reducing hospital stays. And for providers, because Medicare and Medicaid have been very progressive and have continued over the last several years to increase their budget and the scope of these virtual care programs, and it's creating new revenue streams that are very high profit, and it helps them avoid the financial penalties that were introduced by Medicare and Medicaid probably coming up on a decade ago now, where there have been increasing financial consequences for clinicians whose patients are hospitalized more than the average Medicare or Medicaid patient. So the average practice can generate new revenue of over $400 per patient per month by deploying our platform. And we're charging anywhere between $40 and $100 per patient per month, depending on the number of modules used and whether or not they're using our care management services. So it's a very high profit margin revenue stream for the clinicians. And a typical practice can generate over $1 million in new high margin revenue just by using IUGO care. So our revenue model and opportunity, as I said, we have close to 60 million eligible Medicare and Medicaid patients with relevant chronic conditions. We charge subscription fees based on the number of patients. The fees are charged to the clinician. The clinician will, through our platform, we secure both electronic pre-authorization saying these patients are eligible and that the clinician can expect to be reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid, but we also can do electronic claim submission to Medicare and Medicaid for the clinician. And so the clinician is billing Medicare and Medicaid through us. And our typical clients are either a physician practice or physician network, skilled nursing facilities, home health agencies, long-term care facilities. And the payer for us primarily to date has been Medicare and Medicaid, who's paying our clinicians. But going forward, we are diversifying into employer-sponsored health plans and insurance companies. So I think there's a lot of room for growth for the company beyond even the already very significant Medicare and Medicaid market. And the US market for virtual care is currently valued at over $100 billion, but it is rapidly growing. So our growth forecast, this year we've said that we expect to recognize revenue of roughly $40 million. Next year, We plan to uplist to the NASDAQ. We'll be launching our big data play, which is where we're taking all of the patient data that we collect, we anonymize and de-identify it, and we can license that data to pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, governments. And that's really going to be one of our greatest assets going forward. This is very unique data. It's a rich data set. You have patients with, up to 6 to 8 different chronic conditions. They may also have other issues like cancer or gout or, really anything. And so there's the ability for pharmaceutical companies to really delve into the real life of patients who are on various different medications and have quite a broad range of different medical conditions. And so that data is very, very valuable and very unique. And so our ability to license that anonymized data to various parties is something that should be a really significant revenue driver for us from 2023 and beyond. As I mentioned, we expect to have roughly 200,000 patients or more on the platform by the middle of 2023. And that would translate to well over 100 million in annual recurring revenue. And so the trends and tailwinds that are really driving the business right now, and the population in general worldwide is aging and growing. And there are more and more patients with chronic disease because, moving from a more, agrarian lifestyle where people's jobs were more physical to more technology jobs, which tend to be more sedentary, there's just a steadily increasing percentage of chronic disease patients as a percentage of the total population. CMS has introduced financial penalties for clinicians whose chronic disease patients are either seen in the emergency room or hospitalized more than the average. So clinicians can actually lose revenue if they aren't working on keeping these chronic disease patients out of hospital. And since we started working with patients in late 2017, 2018, CMS has increased the reimbursement amounts for virtual care from roughly $59 per patient per month, which was sort of a price point where clinicians were vaguely interested, but we were very much pioneers and missionaries in the space, to now over $400 per patient per month, a 600% increase, which takes us to the point where we are today, where there's just tremendous market pull and demand for our products. And we are no longer having to convince people of the value. It's just a very clear financial equation for clinicians. In addition, Medicare and Medicaid have added over 20 new billing codes since 2018, when Medicare introduced the first single sole billing code for remote patient monitoring. And another several billing codes are coming in 2023 around pain management. So all signs are that Medicare and Medicaid have really demonstrated for themselves the value, the return on investment of deploying virtual care, and that their intent going forward is to not just maintain this very generous program that they have now, but to continue to expand it both in terms of the budget and the scope of the different conditions that are covered. And overall, that implementation of virtual care programs is expected to save Medicare tens of billions of dollars per year going forward, and have really significant impacts on patients' quality of life and long-term health outcomes. So we feel that we're part of something really important, and that this is the future of healthcare. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm happy to take any questions from you, Adam.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for that overview. Let's hop into some questions here. You had a slide on milestones. Maybe elaborate a little bit. What are some key accomplishments Reliq has achieved so far in 2022 that you're proud of and are important to share with investors?
Yeah, I think, for us, 2022, the pandemic was certainly a huge issue in 2020. 2021, we started to come out of that as the vaccine rollout started. There was the Omicron wave, the Delta wave at late 2021 and beginning of 2022. But what we're really excited about is, moving forward from kind of, the quarter ending June 30th was the last quarter where we're really expecting to see a particularly significant impact from COVID. So, we're excited about the fact that we've got a diversity of clients on a diversity of different programs, such that we're much more insulated going forward from impacts from COVID or other other pandemics, God forbid, should any occur. And we've really kind of, I think, graduated or evolved to the point where we're able to sign these much larger clients, and like the clinic in Florida, like Datasoft Logic, who are committing to very large patient numbers to be onboarded in relatively short periods of time. So we have very good visibility now into our forecasts going forward. And I think we've really become recognized as the standard of care in the chronic disease management virtual care space. When we go into potential clients and we're selling our solution, most of the time we're there because of a referral. So the customer actually called us saying, we've heard great things from these other clinicians who are generating all kinds of new revenue and whose patients are staying out of the hospital. Or we're going in through our business development team into some of the larger accounts or through introductions from Cognizant. But when we go in, there's really no other company that we're competing against. So we've developed a platform that's extremely comprehensive, very flexible, but also really uniquely works in the community care space. So we have the sort of very low tech solutions that we use in the home for the patients so that these elderly patients are very adherent. They don't stop using the platform after a little while. They can really get on board with it. It's very, very simple and easy for them. But we have the very powerful technology in the background for the clinicians so that they're able to mimic their workflows using the platform, support their workflows, and we can do all kinds of sort of back office things automatically for them, including that. And going to Medicare and Medicaid and getting the electronic pre-authorizations and doing the electronic claims submission. So I think we've proven ourselves in the market. We've got 4 years of data showing that our clinicians do get reimbursed. We've got 4 years of really solid clinical data showing that the platform is effective. And as a result, I think this is the year where we've really kind of broken through as the standard of care in the community care space. And we've certainly seen a dramatic increase in the number of inbound sales, so sales that are coming from customer referrals. And that's a very, very good sign, particularly in healthcare. Healthcare customers like to buy by reference. So I think it's a very good indicator for us of our prospects for future growth as well.
COVID cases have come down. Seems like it's behind us from an operations standpoint.
Yeah.
Even some vaccine mandates are going away. Are you seeing that in your business, especially given how sensitive you were to it earlier in the year?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing that more and more now. The population that's getting infected with COVID are the younger people. So that has less of an impact on our business than, in the late fall of 2021, very beginning of 2022, when we were seeing a lot of the seniors getting the Omicron and Delta variants. And in fact, a lot of our clinicians got sick with COVID during that time period. So that has a fairly significant impact on us. At this point, certainly the clinicians are fully immunized. They're all getting the bivalent boosters, so they're protected against Omicron specifically. So certainly, I really hesitate to contribute to what I think is in some ways a mass delusion that COVID is over. It's certainly not. I think it's important that we all still take whatever steps are appropriate to protect ourselves based on our own health risks. But from our business's perspective, I think the elderly chronic disease patients have recognized that they need to take appropriate precautions like getting the bivalent booster. And so we don't expect COVID to have a significant impact on the business going forward the way that it did in the first 2 quarters of this year, which reflect, the Omicron and Delta wave from the end of last year and beginning of this year.
You announced some sizable wins lately, securing a nice future flow of patients to be onboarded. How should investors think about how these patients are onboarded? Is it just evenly per month, or there's a build or a ramp? Maybe
generally, I think you should absolutely think of it as a ramp. And what tends to happen is clinicians will start. In some cases, if you're looking at a very small physician practice, they might do 10, 15 patients the first month or two. But as soon as they see that they're getting the reimbursements from Medicare and Medicaid, and they start to ramp up fairly quickly. With the larger clients, and every client will have an implementation plan. And that really spells out, we're going to start with this one facility, might be in this one particular geography. And then, in the next quarter, we want to add, 3 facilities. And then from there, we want to add, 20 facilities. And so it depends on the client, but generally in healthcare, there's always a staged approach to software development, enterprise software deployment, rather. And it's not linear. It's more of a sort of an exponential ramp.
Initially, you've been providing some hardware for patients. Is that still continuing, or more of the recent announcements been software-only relationships?
So, I think I may have said to you on several occasions, I don't want to be in the hardware business. But what we've discovered is if we provide the hardware to our clients, so the clinicians, on a 12 to 24-month payment plan, we're able to provide or to add on a premium surcharge for that financing, such that we're able to make very compelling margins on hardware sales. So as long as that continues, we'll stay in the hardware business because it is something that I think differentiates us from other providers, other software platforms. And, we are software or hardware agnostic, so we will help connect our clients with whatever hardware they want to use. We don't require them to use something that's Reliq branded, which, generally is what happens with devices. So that gives them a lot of flexibility, and clinicians really appreciate that. And we've been able to work out with the device manufacturers and basically just-in-time payment plans. So, we're not paying for the hardware until it's been delivered to the customers and they've paid us. So there's not a big CapEx expenditure around hardware, which is what, originally kind of had me, and that and the typical low margins in that space had me less interested in hardware. But it's really a service that we provide to the clients, helping them secure that hardware. It's a bonus that we're able to generate high margin revenue off of that. But the bulk of our revenues, to this point, have really been hardware, because that's the first thing that clients get is the hardware, and then they put the patient on the platform under Medicare and Medicaid. You can't bill for that first month, and then depending on whether the patient kind of quickly gets in the hang of the routine or it takes a little bit of time since they are older, and to get to the point where they're collecting enough results on enough days that the clinician can bill for them. It typically takes, we would say sort of 2 to 3 months for a client to be able to bill for a patient who's on the platform, to bill Medicare and Medicaid and get reimbursement. And so, because of that sort of lag on the software and the hardware being the first thing you need to get started, to date, our business has been primarily hardware revenues. But going forward, we absolutely expect that over 80% of our revenues will be software related, and that only 20% will be hardware. And so you'll really see that when you look at metrics like our outstanding receivables. So right now, when you have hardware on a 12 to 24-month payable, it's showing up as an outstanding receivable. It's not an at-risk receivable. It's just that there's a 12 to 24-month payment period. But with the software, you'll see the revenue every month that it's billed, and that will become the vast majority of our revenues. So receivables as a percentage of total revenue will come down very significantly. But we expect, we're certainly by the middle of next year will be at least 80% software, 20% hardware.
Can you discuss the new markets that you've developed for IUGO? There's several that you announced: CRO, clinical trials, hospice, pain management, a few others. How should investors look at each new vertical that gets added? And right now, what's the breakdown been so far? Where are you seeing the most traction?
I mean, it's variable. I would say, our core kind of bread and butter right now is still where we started with remote patient monitoring, chronic care management, behavioral health integration, which is that mental health and addiction management has become really important in a lot of markets for us. But, as each new code is introduced, you see more and more uptake in those areas. So, we've gotten into clinical trials. I think we have a really unique product there that can save the pharmaceutical companies who are the trial sponsors a lot of time and money, and really help ensure that data that's collected during the trials from the participants is systematically collected, so it's reliable, and is something that the FDA can really count on as being rigorously collected, so that data is meaningful. Moving into hospice and some of the other spaces like pain management, it's really based on customer demand. So what we typically see is that Medicare and Medicaid will start talking about introducing new billing codes around a certain type of virtual care, and clinicians who serve that patient population, like musculoskeletal patients, so orthopedic surgeons, for example, will be talking to their friends, hear about IUGO care, contact us and say, is this something that would work for my practice? And we're able to say, yep, we've got a module that will do that, and we can set you up very quickly. And so we really are just responding to what the market sees as the unmet needs and what Medicare and Medicaid have identified as priority areas for funding virtual care. And we're fortunate in that, our developers had the foresight to build a very, very flexible platform from the outset. So we're able to cope with, hundreds of millions of users, but also with a very broad range of different clinical conditions. And we can add new modules, within a matter of weeks when a new billing code is introduced or a customer identifies a new market for us.
You announced contracts that have been concentrated in certain states. Is that by design or demographic, or are those
it's not by design in particular. I think we're fairly opportunistic about where we'll go to get patients. But what you see demographically is that the chronic disease patient population in the States tends to be concentrated in the southern states and in the middle of the country. And if you look at Florida, it has a higher than average, elderly population because people like to retire there. And, in many ways, Arizona is similar. And there's a certain demographic there where those, and in South Texas, there's, a different kind of demographic, but these are areas where there are high percentages of chronic disease patients. And so they tend to be states where clinicians are actively looking for a solution to help keep those patients out of hospital. And so that's why, that's kind of where we've started and concentrated: Puerto Rico, Florida, Nevada, Texas, and others. But we are certainly branching out. We're in Michigan and Ohio and Maryland. I mean, I think, ultimately we will certainly have patients active on the platform all over the United States. We have them in the U.S. Virgin Islands already. But, there does tend to be a geographic concentration of chronic disease patients. And so you will see more contracts coming out of certain states. I will say that California doesn't typically fit the mold, the same kind of mold as, say, Texas or Florida in terms of the demographics, and yet there's been tremendous demand out of California. So, we remain optimistic. We don't sort of say we're going to focus all our efforts on these states because we know they have high chronic disease populations, but, we obviously do get a lot of market pull from those states. But if there's pull from a state where we weren't necessarily expecting it, like California, we are very quick to react to that and to serve those clients.
Maybe we can get time here for a couple more. Can you share a little bit of initial feedback from customers or patients that have been on the platform and for a few months already? And also, I think it's important to maybe share with the audience really how early innings this is, the IUGO platform, and how the aging population, is a major tailwind for many, many years to come.
Yeah, and I'll sort of start with the second part of your question. And, if you look at the lifetime of this company as an active commercial enterprise, you really should only be looking from kind of July 1st, 2021 to now. So, not even a year and a half, because the pandemic really impacted any company that was involved in a proactive, preventative, segment of the healthcare market. People, clinicians and patients during the pandemic were just very focused on acute care. The acute care system was completely overwhelmed, and there was really no room for preventative, proactive care for chronic disease patients. So we've really only been able to really get out there and get traction since the beginning of July in 2021. And we've seen tremendous growth during that time. But this is absolutely our first steps. So we're still, kind of at the crawling stage. We're moving on to walking, but we'll be running very quickly very soon. So it's absolutely early innings. We're absolutely at an inflection point, and I think there's tremendous growth ahead of us. And in terms of customer feedback, I mean, the greatest customer feedback you can have, particularly in healthcare, where people really don't care about brands, but do care about what their colleagues are using and what's been successful for them. And so we've seen, fantastic word of mouth. As I said, a lot of our leads now come inbound, so through customer referrals. And we get very positive feedback from clinicians on how easy to use the platform is, how quickly it installs, and they get very excited when they get their first reimbursement checks from Medicare and Medicaid. And from the patient perspective, we have incredibly high adherence, whereas typical adherence, we have over 98% adherence. Typical software platforms that have launched in this space that use, apps on tablets and things like that, you're looking at less than 20% adherence after the first 2 weeks. So we get excellent long-term adherence. And, we get positive feedback from patients. But, I think the most important feedback we get from patients is that we really are saving lives. We've had clinicians report to us that they had patients who took double their blood pressure medication and they were alerted that the patient had an alarmingly low blood pressure. They were able to quickly refer that patient to the ER where they were able to get the appropriate medications to bring their blood pressure back up, and then they could go home again. Whereas what frequently happens with elderly patients who forget medication and then double up on it is nobody knows, nobody realizes their blood pressure is low, and they faint and have a fall and they break a hip and they're looking at surgery, or they get a head injury. I mean, they're very serious consequences typically. So these early interventions that we're able to make, these automated interventions, are providing a tremendous safety net for patients. And we get feedback not just from the patients, but from the family members that, it's been a huge addition to their lives, a huge benefit in their lives, because they're no longer, having to take grandma to the hospital all the time. They don't have to have a relative who's stopping in every day to, check on their aging relative who's aging in place. It's a big benefit to the family members that, grandma can be at home but safe, and they don't have to worry about trying to get her into a long-term care facility that she doesn't want to go to, but that there's this, very unobtrusive safety net for them in the home that's very, very effective. So we get a lot of positive feedback. I think from a business perspective, the most important positive feedback we get is all of the customer referrals.
Just one house cleaning question. When will Q4 year-end be reported approximately?
Right. So we will be filing our annual audited financials October 28th, and we'll have a webinar to discuss them on October 29th in the morning.
Anything else you want to add before we end the discussion?
Just a reminder that, shortly after that, at the end of November, we'll be reporting the quarter ending September 30th. I think that quarter and subsequent quarters are the ones that will be the most interesting to watch. And, as we've said repeatedly, up to June 30th, there was an impact of COVID on the business. And beyond that, there was much less of the constraint. So, I think we're very much at a point where we're going to have results, consistently every quarter that I think will get the market very excited and help to give investors, the confidence in where the numbers that we've been sharing for quite a while are coming from, give people a lot more visibility. So I think it's a very exciting time for the business, and we really look forward to what's ahead for us and our shareholders.
Great. Lisa, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. To anyone else out there that has not already signed up for a one-on-one, again, please send me an email at lowensteiner@lythampartners.com, or again, visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meeting request button. We hope you have a great conference. And again, thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, Adam.